Another Tobago Carnival has come to a close, and it's time to talk about the success of the same. Joining us this morning is Dr. Charleston Thomas, Technical Advisor, and also the Designated Carnival Planning Lead for the Division of Tourism, Culture, Antiquities and Transportation. Good morning, Dr. Thomas, and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you with us on the show this morning. Let's jump straight into the conversation. Can you share some highlights of Tobago Carnival and particularly what made it a success?
So it was, of course, a very hectic month of activities. It really began with the Blue Food experience, which before the Tobago Carnival came on stream was the highlight of this time of the year. All right. But since the carnival, the October Carnival came on stream, the Blue Food event got worked into part of the carnival marketing and branding. So that was one of our highlights. Then we went, of course, to the Legends Weekend, which was a weekend that began with a musical on Calypso Rose, the Tuco Legends show that was linked to the Tuco Monarch, Tobago Monarch, and then the final curtain fall show with the David Rudder, which was a Sunday. So that was the Legends Weekend. Then we had a week of very intense activities at the festival's ground. We had the Soca Titans, which is the Tobago version of the Soca Monarch, all right? That happened on the Wednesday. Quite an exciting time, in fact. And then we had the final weekend where we had the Juve, the night mass, the pan, rhythm, and powder, as well as the parade of the bands. So when you add all that together, it was an extremely hectic and quite a celebratory, intensely exciting weekend.
Definitely an intensely exciting weekend. So we've seen the integration of culture and tourism when it comes to Tobago Carnival 2023. And of course, this is something we expect to see moving forward. But as of now, how do you think so far that Tobago has been able to effectively balance the two?
Well, there is this saying out there that Tobago is the heritage capital of the Caribbean, because the number of festivals we have on the island that concentrate on our different aspects of our heritage, it's not a very difficult thing to have, tradition find its way in a very central way in our contemporary festivities. So it's not a very difficult thing to see characters that you might find in the Heritage Festival or in let's say some of the cultural behaviors that you find in the harvest village harvest festivals, for example. It's not difficult to find them, emerging as part of the carnival celebrations as well as part of the whole carnival showcasing. So we always bring tradition and the modern together that's part of what we do quite well in Tobago. So that wasn't a difficult thing at all for us. Yeah.
It's beautiful to see the ease of being able to incorporate the both, which definitely leads to that benefit on the economy as well.
Like next year you might easily see Gangang Sarah floating through one of the contemporary bands. That's not going to be difficult for us to imagine, right? Because that's what we do, and that's what we do best.
Definitely. So let's talk about the fact that you're able to incorporate that culture, of course, into the carnival and the benefit to the economy particularly. What benefits would you say that it brought this year to the economy of Tobago?
Well, if you just go on the preliminary statistics, the preliminary data, yesterday I was told, in terms of estimates, we have about we put about 20,000 people on the ground in Scarborough just for the weekend. That will include Juve, all the activities that culminated in Scarborough. And as I said, the activities spread across the old and the new, right? So what that tells us is that beyond this carnival, in fact, and before the carnival, Tobago has always been very magnetic. Part of that magnetic flavor is directly contingent on our tradition and our culture and how we live, how we speak, right? How we move. And therefore, to see say 20,000 people on the ground in Scarborough involving themselves in the thickness of that culture, certainly, we will have to see what the data tells us, but there certainly has to be some kind of immense economic value that is directly connected to how we do culture on the island.
Definitely. And taking a look at some of the videos on screen right now, we can see that there were some large events, well attended. As Doctor just said, 20,000 people touched the island over the last, let's say, week or so in order to enjoy the festivities.
Well, Scarborough, I would say, touch Scarborough, because an interesting point to make is that Tobago is such a very complex, small but large society, in that while you have these many thousands on the ground in Scarborough, you had many other thousands escaping to elsewhere to get away from that, which is also part of Tobago's carnival culture, right? Even for the National Carnival, you have droves of people from Trinidad who are Christians who come to Tobago because it's a quieter island around the national time. And they use that, Tobago as the escape to find a different experience around the carnival time. That also happened in October. You had people moving into Castara, moving to Charlottesville, all right, doing different things. And there were also many pockets of smaller activities taking place in home yards, in villas, in guest houses, all around the time, in fact, when all these people were on the streets in Scarborough. So it was a very dynamic thing, you see. So I just needed to share that as well.
Yes, of course, Dr. Thomas. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, speaking about an influx of people coming, not just Trinbagonians, but of course those from around the world, one of the key things is safety, which is so important to the success of a carnival. Can you share with us some of the highlights of how safe people were on the road, on the island for this time, and perhaps any feedback that you may have received from those on the ground?
Well, I'll tell you, we had the benefit of having ACP Collis Hazel, who was the gold standard officer responsible for managing Carnival in Port of Spain last year, which, as you know, was the first carnival post-COVID, right? And he happens to be Tobagonian. And in fact, we happened to study together at university. So that I was lead, and that he was now, he is in fact the senior police officer on the island. It became a very easy thing to talk security. He in fact mobilized a number of very large meetings and some smaller, very important meetings to educate people as to what safety means in regard to the security mechanism in the country. Sometimes we think safety is simply just making sure that people are safe from harm and injury, but within the context of security and the security mechanism in the country, safety is a lot deeper than that, right? So he was able to mobilize people and offer the education in that regard. So we had quite a number of large stakeholder meetings, and where folks like health, Digicel, the communication services, all were involved and spoke to the question of safety and security. In fact, in relation to people's response, I got a message yesterday from someone who said we should start to brand Tobago as the safest carnival in the region, because Tobago is a safe place as well. Never mind the creeping problem we have with murder, right? And I'm saying murder, not crime, because I'm distinguishing the two things, right? But we are a safe island by and large, and we also want to have that be an imprint of our carnival, right? We know that people come to Tobago and drive around and don't necessarily have to look over their shoulders, because we don't get on in a certain way here. Let's just say that.
I couldn't agree with you more. Now, something you mentioned is everybody being involved, so all hands. We were lucky to have ACP with us on the show to discuss the strategy prior to Carnival. So seeing now that it was highly effective is definitely, we know, going to be a success. Well, was a success and will be a success moving forward. Now, Dr. Thomas, what about the community involvement in particular? You said everybody was involved. How successful was the community's involvement in Tobago Carnival 2023?
I'm glad you asked. One of the things I did as lead to begin the work of planning Carnival was to have a large number of stakeholder meetings with community groups who were classified as stakeholders, all right? So cultural groups, you had residents of Scarborough who were going to be immediately impacted. by the presence of the carnival in Scarborough, and other stakeholders. And we allowed people to give us ideas which informed what we did on the weekend. So a good example would be that the route we used in Scarborough last year is the same route we used this year. However, the route was reversed, and that reversing of the route was a suggestion by stakeholders, right? So that's one of the ways in which we certainly try to kind of get everybody on board in feeding us ideas, as well as in suggesting, better ways to think about how we manage things, how we do things. And we needed to have done that because, of course, we didn't quite get the assistance that we needed to have received and was promised from NCC. But barring that, and that's the spirit of Tobago too, right? With or without help, we do our thing. And we know how to get, one of the ways we still build homes on the island is corralling people from the village, where they bring a bucket of water and who bring, a little pot of food, and we build the house, right?
Yes.
So even when we were renovating our own home, my wife and I, right, we were encouraged by my mother-in-law to use that strategy, but it couldn't work for us. But so that's how we do things. That's how we do things.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Thomas, and thank you for being on the show. Hoping that we continue the conversation about Tobago Carnival as it continues to grow. Have a wonderful day.
You too, sister. Bye-bye.
The success of Tobago Carnival right here on the Now Morning Show. And coming up after this break, the launch of Carnival 2024. We'll be back in a few.